This week on ICN, the stories you should have heard, but didn't. Government continues to push the boundaries in attempting to track you. Prominent financial analyst says states are in big financial trouble. Los Angeles admits failures with federal stimulus funds. Those stories and more next on Informed Citizen News. Hello and welcome to ICN, Informed Citizen News, week of October 25th, 2010. Before we get to the news, we'd like to update you on ICN. First, we're getting back to a weekly broadcast, starting with this show. We also want to announce the publication of our website, InformedCitizenNews.com. The main purpose of the site is to provide a backup to YouTube in case we lose our ability to post broadcasts. The site will also provide easier access to review previous shows. We have a clear vision for ICN, but we will need your help. We are now accepting PayPal contributions through our website to fund our growth. We want to be what public broadcasting is meant to be, totally viewer-funded, no advertisers, no corporate sponsors, and especially no government funding. Your contributions will not be tax-deductible, as we will not seek a tax-deductible status. Our only allegiance will be to you, the viewer, and we will never compromise that. Our broadcast and website will be free to access. Your contributions are voluntary, and we ask for your assistance in funding our growth so we can take the steps necessary to reach more Americans. Our hope is that each viewer can contribute $25 per year. If you can't afford that, then do what you can. If you can do more, even better. For those who can contribute $25 or more each year, we will email you all the stories that were considered for the show but didn't make the cut. Each week, we research and select about 30 stories to consider in the broadcast, and less than 10 make the show. There may be any number of reasons these stories didn't make it, but it would be a waste to leave all that research on the cutting room floor. This week, everyone can access all the stories considered for this broadcast on the ICN website. To date, we have not marketed ICN, and our growth can only be credited to our viewers spreading the word. We currently have over 4,500 subscribers and average about 4,000 views per show. We're setting a goal of receiving 2,000 individual contributions by November 30th. Please contribute to ICN by going to InformedCitizenNews.com and clicking the Make a Contribution button. And thank you for supporting us. Now let's get to the news. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals recently ruled that the government can install a GPS device on your car to track your movement without a warrant. The controversial case received national attention, and the lone dissenting judge stated, George Orwell's novel 1984 has arrived, a bit later than expected, but it's here at last. The following stories show government's growing appetite for tracking us. A Santa Clara, California man was sitting in a waiting room while the oil was being changed in his car. The mechanic spotted an odd device with a wire hanging on the undercarriage. The car owner, Mr. Afifi, posted images online to see if anyone could help him identify the device. It turned out to be a GPS tracking system placed by the government without a warrant. 2 days later, a couple of FBI agents knocked on his door to reclaim their equipment. California officials are outfitting preschoolers in Contra Costa County with RFID tags to track their attendance, whereabouts, and even if they've eaten or not. School officials claim the tracking system will save staff hours in manually tracking students. The RFID program was funded by a $50,000 grant from the federal government. In Houston, Texas, the school district has been expanding their RFID program. Thousands of students are now being tracked with RFID tags. An article in the Houston Chronicle states that students haven't complained much about the new badges. Most are used to being electronically monitored as their campuses have had surveillance cameras for years. Jacory Jackson, a 6th grader at Bailey Middle School, said, "It feels like someone's watching you at all times." Another student admitted that it feels a bit awkward to know adults can track your every movement on campus, but she said she understands the benefits. She said, "It makes you mindful knowing you could get caught if you do something wrong." In a follow-up to a story we covered earlier this year, the Philadelphia School District settled an invasion of privacy lawsuit with 2 students for $650,000. The school district had activated the webcams on school-issued laptops while the students were at home. One student found out about the invasion of privacy when an administrator accused him of taking drugs in his bedroom. But it turned out he was only snacking on Mike and Ike candies. The two students received $185,000, while their attorneys collected $425,000. As the federal government's appetite for money grows, there may come a time when taxes and borrowing fall short of planned spending. Rumblings in Washington, D.C. are growing louder regarding the feasibility of forcing private retirement accounts to buy Treasury bonds. Last month, the Department of Labor held hearings where the topic was discussed. One thing for sure, with $4.7 trillion in retirement plan assets on the line, Wall Street will not let go of the golden goose too easy. It's worth keeping an eye on this story as it develops in the months to come. Financial analyst Meredith Whitney, who had publicly predicted much of the financial turmoil in recent years, now says state governments are the next to financially implode. She says that there is no transparency in most state governments' financial reporting and likens them to the condition of banks in 2007. She claims that there is a real danger of states and cities defaulting on pension obligations and bonds, something people say can't happen, just like they said housing prices would never go down. Here are a few insights from Ms. Whitney.
Let's talk about this report, The Tragedy of the Commons. I know it's been making a lot of headlines. To be fair, we've heard a lot about, these states are in, fiscal problems, they've got to raid their pension funds. But you came out with this report, you use your own metrics to rate them.
Yes, people have talked about it. But when people talk about it, they don't have any tangible numbers. They throw around a lot of different numbers. It's not their fault. It's that the data available is so murky, is so untransparent, and the complacency is so abundant. So people think, oh, the federal government will bail these states out. I don't think that's going to be. I don't think it's going to be that easy. So why is someone in Nebraska going to bail someone in California out? Legally, taxpayers are required to make up for any shortfall in pension funds.
Right.
And legally, well, everyone's going to be required to pay higher taxes because that's where we're going.
But so
the way the flow works, and so specifically, while it may seem crazy for Florida to implement an income tax, it seemed crazy for New Jersey to implement an income tax in the 70s, or Connecticut to implement an income tax in the 80s, and Washington State is talking about implementing an income tax now. So everything has been on the table and is on the table. What will happen is a third of local municipal funding comes from the states. So when the states get into trouble, they are going to protect the state, and
take away from the
municipalities. That support certainly will be compromised.
Okay, how soon of a bailout do you expect, if there is one, from the federal government?
I think over the next 12 months. There has to be.
Over the next 12 months.
But I don't know that that's politically viable. I think that it's going to be an incredibly divisive issue. So our next report, one thing that we didn't include because this was just so massive, is optionality for the states, looking at what assets the states can sell. Do certain states do leaseback proposals? I mean, you do what you can. Do certain states move from public to private, sell airports, so toll roads? So we have that analysis too.
Ms. Whitney's predictions and analysis have been on target in the past, and her new take on state government finances is consistent with recent stories we've covered here at ICN. It appears that there is a worldwide land grab underway. The UK Guardian reports that land purchases by sovereign wealth funds, as well as state entities such as China, are up tenfold from a decade ago. Most of the land rush is occurring in Africa and focused on locking up the future food supply. Certain countries like Brazil have gone so far as to implement new laws limiting foreign ownership of domestic land. With food demand rising and food production not able to keep up, investors are buying up land to flip when food producers come calling. Americans' growing dependence on the government is reaching new levels. In a statistic we've been following, there are now close to 42 million people in America that receive food stamp assistance from the government. That's up 10 million people in just over 1 year. It's a sad commentary on how far this country has fallen economically. Earlier this month in New Hampshire, a baby girl was taken from her parents by Child Protective Services. An affidavit signed by Child Protective Service worker Dana Bickford, seeking government custody of the newborn, said, quote, "The agency became aware and confirmed that the father associated with a militia known as the Oath Keepers." The father was accused of abuse, and ICN has no details on those accusations. But the affidavit identifying the father's political association with Oath Keepers and incorrectly labeling it as a militia step over into political persecution. The founder of Oath Keepers submitted a letter clarifying the organization and demanded that the militia claim be retracted. There was no response from the court, but the child was returned to the parents a few days later. There are no future court proceedings scheduled against the father at this time. The CATO Institute produced a video on the topic of private citizens recording law enforcement in public. Many of the incidents that they discuss have been covered by ICN this year. The CATO Institute encourages the recording of law enforcement in action, and their video is worth watching as it covers some of the legal aspects associated with recording government employees. You'll find the link to their video in our news sources. The Los Angeles City Controller admitted last month that they only saved 55 jobs with the $111 million they received from the federal stimulus program. That's about $2 million per job saved. The Los Angeles Department of Public Works did a little better in saving 45 jobs with only $70 million. The loser in this race was the city's Department of Transportation. Armed with $40.8 million in stimulus funds, they created only 9 jobs. The audit report states the numbers were disappointing due to bureaucratic red tape, absence of competitive bidding for projects in private sectors, inappropriate tracking of stimulus money, and a laxity in bringing out timely job reports. In 2008, the New York Fed bought illiquid Hilton hotel debt from Goldman Sachs and Bank of America for $320 million in order to bail them out. The Financial Times just reported that the New York Fed lost $180 million when selling the same debt to the Blackstone Group this year. This is another example that banks are at the top of the food chain, and the Federal Reserve's main purpose is to assure that Wall Street banks are profitable at our expense. In an effort to shore up the budget, California is selling 24 government buildings for $2.3 billion to a private investment group. After paying off building loans, it will leave an estimated $1.2 billion for the state's budget. In the long term, the state will rent back the same space from the private investment group for an estimated cost to taxpayers of $5.2 billion over the next 20 years. This maneuver shows how desperate California is in the short term. In a follow-up to a story we've covered over the past year, former attorney Richard Fine, who was jailed for contempt of court since mid-2009, was finally released last month. He accused Los Angeles judges of conflict of interest and bribery for taking salary from the county in addition to their compensation from the state. At the time, county judges could only be paid by the state. He claimed that judges received money from the county could not be partial in cases to which the county was a named party. Fine had his license taken away, and in an unrelated 2009 case, a judge held him in contempt and jailed him for 583 days until he let him go last month. Now free, Richard Fine is contemplating his next steps, which he says will be to get his license back and make a documentary about his battle with judges in Los Angeles County. And finally, President Obama twice cited the unanimous Declaration of 1776, more commonly referred to as the Declaration of Independence. But each time, he left out the word creator. This story received national attention and was fodder for talking heads. We find this episode disturbing. Whether or not Obama believes in a creator is not relevant, as the Constitution prevents religion from being a test to serve in office. The concern is the premeditation in which Obama and his staff took in rewriting history. They precisely cited those words from the Declaration, except for creator.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed with certain inalienable rights, life and liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Those who show a willingness to rewrite history pose the greatest danger. The question to be asked is why remove the word creator when quoting from such an important historical document?
Robert, 2 questions. Twice in recent weeks, the President has quoted from the Declaration of Independence and has omitted the Declaration's reference to rights, quote, endowed by their Creator. Why did he omit this part of the Declaration?
I haven't seen the comments, Lester, but I can assure you the President believes in the Declaration of Independence.
Okay.
White House Press Secretary Gibbs shows his agility in avoiding and redirecting a straightforward question. We are left to continue to speculate as to why Obama is afraid of the word creator. Thanks for watching, and please help us reach our goal of 2,000 contributors by the end of November. From all of us at Informed Citizen News, we will see you next week.